Hello, my name is Mary Mack. I'm the Executive Director of ACEDS, the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists, and I want to welcome you to a very special podcast with some very special guests. We have with us Rick Clark, the founder of Cura, and our extremely special guest, Robert Childress, the founder of WAVE and the Masters Conference. Along with them, we have Kaylee Wallstead, the new VP of Client Engagement at ACEDS, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. We'll have a part one and a part two. Part one is going to be about the founding of the organizations that Robert built, and then second, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Robert right now. So Robert and Rick and Kaylee, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excited to be here with the fabulous Robert and Rick Clark.
The Rick Clark. So you two worked together back in the day, and I remember, Rick, when I saw you at ILTA, I was remembering things like the soap in the restrooms at Legal Tech. Stealth marketing for WAVE. WAVE software just burst on the scene. Can you guys give me a little bird's eye view of what was going on as you were founding and working together in the early days?
I'll let you start, Robert.
Want me to start? Oh, okay.
Yep.
So Rick Clark, or Richard Clark, or Dick Clark, who you know him as, who also does the music. Dick Clark used to do the what was it, Rick? The the New Year's Eve thing. So
yep.
Rick Clark
this was long ago e-discovery then, really long ago e-discovery.
Yes, this is back when everything was black and white. No, I'm kidding. But once again, my name's Robert Childress. I had hired Rick Clark when I actually had a service bureau. I had left LexisNexis, and I created a service bureau. And this guy comes in our office and basically sits down in the corner and just starts talking to my staff and myself. And after he left, I asked my staff, who was that? And they said he was a competitor's salesperson. And instead of being upset about it, I was impressed. I was like, wow, if that guy feels like he can just walk in and sit down, I want to get to know him. Basically, I hired him in my, pulled him out of that bureau and pulled him into my bureau, and had to have him working for me because if anybody has the balls to do that, if you will, I just thought, wow, he should be working with me. And Rick and I have been together for almost 15, 20 years. Rick, I don't know how long that's been, probably about 18.
Since 03.
We started, huh?
Since 03. So I'm not going to math right now, but and for clarification, the reason I did go to your office is because you had a similar product we did, and we needed an overflow vendor to help us for our larger projects. But you know what? Perception's reality. I'll stick with that story. That's totally fine.
Well, I just figured, to be fair, is the office that we had was one room. So you could see the people, we had it locked, but if you were sitting there, you could see everything that we do. So from a boss's standpoint, without hearing the conversation, I just thought, well, who is this guy? But yeah, so I've never looked back. I always thought Rick was phenomenal, and I still do today. And I left the bureau that I had created because it just wasn't me. For all of you out there who do the service bureau work and service clients at Sunday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I commend you because it was something I could never do. After 3 or 4 years of doing it, just felt like this just wasn't my calling. Because before that, I had software sales for Lexis for a good 12 years, and so I enjoyed being in law, but decided that I needed to go out and do something else. And we always had this idea for a software solution that could make the process a lot easier for processing data And back then, you couldn't handle PSTs, NSFs, OSTs within a lot of the review platforms that existed then. And one of the largest review platforms that are out there today didn't exist. And we'll get to that in a second. So we started Wave Software, and we didn't have a real funder. We had someone who was willing to pay salaries while we worked at Panera. And my first hire was actually Richard Clark. And we hadn't actually started the company truly. It was pretty much developing product. We had a name of the organization, but we hadn't really come up with much. And so because we were working out of a Panera. And we hired Rick. Rick was initially the first sales guy. So now at Panera, we had Wes Hodges, who was my CTO, myself, and Rick Clark all sitting at a table for a year. And then we finally moved into an office, and we finally hired more staff. And from there on, we started. But it had everything to do with the fact that when Rick came into play with Wave Software, he basically started closing some business and pulling money in the door, and we were able to grow the company past that. The next thing that we did, and then I'll hand it over to you, Rick, is Lexus had developed, or basically had trained me for years. I mean, we had training every year on the idea of if you're going to sell software, you have to develop a community and you have to develop an education portal. And so we did just that. So we developed a community that's out there today, and we developed the Masters Conference, which is currently active today. And we didn't have the resources to have our own marketing machine, really. Every time I went to every time I went to Legal Tech or ILTA, it was always $6,000 to $10,000, and I was offered a floor mat for $6,000. And we just didn't go for it. So we decided to sponsor the bathrooms, for those of you who remember us as that. We decided to create the Masters Conference, for those of you who know the new Wave as that. We had this member group that's out there today actively going, and every time we flew to a city, we actively got people involved. And then we had a golf tournament for a long time that we actively got involved raising money for children at the Arnold Palmer Hospital. And Wave was just had always been this, we're just going to do it on our own kind of thing. And we grew it into a fabulous company with fabulous clients, and had a great staff there and a bunch of people that we currently are friends with today that are doing very well out in the space. And Rick had an extraordinary impact on helping us get out of Panera into a real office. And so, Rick, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a good memory lane stroll. So I just remember the days, we had our first Masters, and I think it was like a month before we had a handful of people who wanted to attend. I mean, and this was one of the first boutique, actually probably was the first boutique e-discovery specific conference. And so, but that was at the time where people were still doing handshakes of, let's ignore the data and let's just still go after the file cabinets. And so, in DC, it was obviously a great place to start it. But I remember one day I had 2 satchels full of Masters Conference, basically brochures for attendees. And so I walked from one side of K Street all the way down to the other and unloaded all of these various law firms' mail rooms and start plugging them in. So we were doing all sorts of stuff in August or September, and so we had a good time doing it. But yeah, it was really born out of wanting to help the industry. We realized that I would conduct meetings and have to explain what a PST was in a lot of instances. Again, this is early on, and so we decided to get the masters of the industry where currently was and currently doing the same thing today, to get everybody in a room, collaborate, and have more of a discussion versus like a legal tech or an ILTA being very IT focused, I believe at the time. And so it was really one of those first ones to help the industry. That helped my conversations on the business side with Trident or at Wave Software. and also built, the partnerships and things with the provider community, and so that was that was the plan for it all back then, and yeah, it was a great kickoff, and a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of flying around, but that was great.
What's crazy about Masters is we have watched ACIDS develop, from the beginning. I remember early days when it started, people that were involved growing all the way up into, what it is today. And we've watched, because what ended up happening was, as Rick had hinted, clients just we would go in there and do a whole pitch, and then they'd raise their hand. This is before Masters. They'd raise their hand and go, "What's a PST?" Or it got more complicated. In a year, they're like, "Well, we've got this thing called OST. You know what that is?" And today it seems comical, right? But I like to think that we had a hand in the reason why that is comical today. Because initially we said, well, instead of trying to bang our head against the wall, let's just form a group, get everybody together, and start educating them on this. And we have had, at the Masters Conference, we have had almost every group that you rely upon today, whether it's from EDI on to Sedona, on to Georgetown, and so on. Almost all of those individuals, if you go back and you look at the photos that are online, or even some of the groups there, or some of the news articles, you'll see that a lot of these individuals, we had them initially in the Masters Conference. And it's just fantastic. I have photos where if you stop me, I'll show you. But I have photos of a lot of you who might be listening to this podcast at the first Masters or the second Masters. I just spent some time with David Cohen in London, and I said, "Hey, do you want to see something interesting, David?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Here you are at the shrimp table in 2000, I think it was, let's see, our 10-year anniversary was when was it, Kaylee? In 2004, so was that when we had that?
2006,
Yeah.
I believe we the first
2006, was it? And I had a picture of David Cohen at the sandwich table or whatever, because Masters, we only had one event that year, every year for about 4 or 5 years. And so we would pour all the money as we could into, we had a sushi, I could show you if you stop me, but we had sushi, we had ice sculptures, we had all sorts, we had chocolate fountains, and so many of these photos of Judge Peck and a lot of these individuals that we listen to and trust today that that will go to ACIDS to hear speak, or even Masters or other groups, were heavily involved in Masters. And we all kind of felt the same way, I thought. How are we going to get this out? And, I was at the table when we first started talking about certification, and I won't go into it, but all the individuals at the table for dinner had a competing, they had different opinions and competing opinions about it, and they went out and started creating their groups, and those groups are out there today. And I remember the day we sat there and listened to the conversation. So I'm proud of our impact on this community. I mean, I have a photo within Wave, and Wave itself, Rick, which I'll let you discuss, developed some huge partners today that a lot of people would be honored to be working with. And there was a point in time at Wave where we were at every users group for every single review platform. And some of the early days of the review platforms that you trust today, very few people involved in those organizations, maybe 3 employees, 4 employees, and now they're massive. And Wave was the first integrators with a lot of these people, because we were one of the few people that actually did this conversion. You had iPro, you had Law, but this is what we had at our service bureau, and it didn't handle the things that we needed, so we created this product called Trident. And so with Trident, Rick, we integrated with a lot of these other people, and you had a lot to do with that, right?
Yeah, those were our initial partners, and really the reason why it worked out so well is because Trident was a complementary product to do pre-calling before law, iPro, any of the others. So it was just high volumes of data, can get cold quickly. So it was very appealing to many of the providers, especially in that time. There were a lot of backups of emails that had to be deduplicated and consolidated down. And so that was the real power of it. And so we just got to know the community as a whole. So I remember even going to ICE meltdowns and all sorts of fun stuff back then. But yeah, that's what Trident did.
And one of the best things that we did for those of you who are developing companies or actively working with a company is we scored, I think, the top 4 consulting firms as clients initially. So here we are, basically, and this had everything to do with Rick, but we basically had Deloitte and et cetera as our first client. Most people say it's a law firm. Most people say it's a corporation. Ours is a consulting firm. And so what they did is they instantaneously told us what they were missing. And so we continued to develop it. And one of the last things we did as I was stepping out the door, was we developed a self-collection tool that, I don't like to use the word tool, solution that Deloitte had paid us for and that we had developed and launched out to the industry. And that took a whole new direction for Wave at the time and moved us into a new product called Explorer, which some of you guys might have been familiar with. And so I was very proud of my time there. It was a lesson in, this will get better. Sitting at Panera, they're out of French vanilla. Creamer was pretty much the comment that I would make, I think, daily. So it was either talking to clients or trying to figure out where all the creamer went. So I'd been there all day. So it was a proud moment, and it took me through a lot. The proud moment to grow the company. I remember our first HR issue, and I took it as not as, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I took it as, holy crap, we finally became a real company. I have to go down the hall and tell people to stop, making comments to each other. Really? Like, seriously? And so it was just a great time. And Rick left us a couple of years ago and went out on his own, and I was super proud, super excited for his accomplishments and what he's done and where he's at today. And I am now full-time. I left Wave Software, and I'm now full-time running the Masters Conference. And we have decided going into 2019 that we're going to go back to our roots, that we're going to stick with the smaller conferences because they're growing like crazy. But we're going to go back to the Masters Conference that a lot of you enjoyed and participated in next year, because we really enjoyed that. A lot of people have asked us to go back to that as opposed to just doing just the small events around the country. But the exciting thing about what we've done with Rick's help and everybody else, Kevin Clark and Bruce Malter and even ACIDS and many of the other individuals that are involved, like Dan Regard and Julie Lewis. What the fantastic thing with all of these individuals is now, even in London with Nigel Murray and Chris Dale and all of the other individuals that we work with, we now know everybody. We are a first name basis with all of these excellent people. Most of the comments I get today is, I'm really upset that you didn't invite me. And I'm like, what do you mean I didn't invite you? You're always invited. Like, I should send you an invite that says you are always invited. But we've just grown so much and expanded so much that now I think it's time to do that, to go back to an event where it is these individuals that are leading the charge on blockchain and cybersecurity, and we've really jumped out of the e-discovery world. That's actually why it's called the Masters Conference. We never intended it to just be one discipline like e-discovery or cybersecurity or information governance. We always intended it to be anything. It could actually be the Masters Conference for medical. So there's a lot of exciting things that we're working on today, and that's obviously why Rick is involved. I don't know. Is that a good sum up there, Kaylee and Mary? Does that help?
Oh, it's fascinating, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Earth-shattering. Well, we have some crazy stories. We have tons of crazy stories. Like, for those of you listening, if you've heard of the 007 party, that's all I need to say. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stop me and I'll tell you. Because it's a whole other conversation. But we just were so creative. We would sit in the office. It was a lot of fun. One of the things we did that we enjoyed that I missed tremendously is we used to decorate our desks, and we would have competitions. Now everybody works at home. Kaylee, I'm sure you work at home, and so on and so forth. But we used to have, like, Christmas. We would make was it you, Rick, that made a log cabin? Who made a log cabin out of their desk?
Yeah, I think me and Brian Ayler made log cabins.
Brian Ayler, I was notorious for hiring people and training them on our space, and then they ended up coming out and just being incredible. And Brian Ayler is now a pilot. And when I hired him, he was like 21 years old, maybe 20. And Rick had developed. He had basically turned both of their desks into this. They had I think he had a fireplace, and they had this log cabin that they had built. And Lindsay Couch at the time had built her. I forget what she did, but every year we had this competition, and so everyone had to make their desk Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, or Hanukkah or whatever it was. And then we did an award thing, and we had like a Dundee Award, which was a Santa Claus, and so everybody got like a Santa Claus. And so we a couple times we went out and rode go-karts during lunch just to get our minds off of what we were doing. And so we were just exciting, fun organization with an attitude of, let's just do it. And at one point in time, I'm up at Trump Towers with the head of ALM, Arnold Palmer, and the Trump Organization talking about how to raise money for the hospital. And then we ran golf events across the country at Wingfoot and all these amazing places. So here I am, a guy who started out at Panera developing Wave software to running golf tournaments for Arnold Palmer around the country with Masters and Wave software and of course other groups that are out there. Even ACID was involved at that time, Kaylee and Mary. We actually had booths for them, and so it was just amazing how we basically just busted our butt and created something from nothing. So, would you agree, Rick?
Yeah. It was it was like riding a rodeo every day. It was a lot of fun.
You've done that many times, Robert. Think about it. All the different things you've founded and started, and all the excitement and all the hard work, and especially getting something started and bootstrapping. And amazing you met Rick. He is a very impressive, amazing, talented person. So that sounds like a long-standing friendship and partnership. How long have you guys known each other?
I think since 2003.
The office.
Yeah. 03,
yeah, so
we'll be in
15
years.
That's insane. No,
wow.
Rick always had the tenaciousness of it. When you're somebody like me that, you can walk in and go, what if we had purses with no handles on it? And instead of saying, that's a horrible idea, I'd be like, well, what are you thinking? It's a magnet thing? Maybe there's something on your shoulder that, it just magnetizes to your shoulder. And Rick was always like, I don't know, let's check it out. Let's see what we could do. He was always that way. Or, and Rick has always been somebody who would come to me and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And it's kind of like, I'm sure you all on the call, and you and Mary and Kaylee, is you always have those people in your life that, you could go quiet for a year or two, maybe not talk to them for a while, and then the moment you see them at a dinner, it's like nothing ever changed. it's like it's just at the moment you stop talking or you didn't engage just because you were busy, it's like you pick it back up. Rick has always been that way. I have a couple of people like that in the space that I really rely on, and that's really the big key. Is a lot of people go out there and they get funding and they burn through it. I actually had someone tell me within the past year that, you just go out and get funding, and if it doesn't work, you just find something else and get funding for that. And I just thought that, wow, that's the crappiest way to look at things, And so to me, it's always been the relationship. If there's one way to get me or the one way to burn me is develop a relationship with me and then cut it, and then just never look back, because I get to the point where I trust people, and I'm very trusting, and then and Rick has always been, and a handful of other people have always been there for me, and that's just been really I guess amplified this year. And I don't know if you want me to just kind of touch on that, Mary and Kaylee.
This is a great segue.
I absolutely do want you to touch on that, because one of the things that struck me coming into the Masters is the community feel to it, and that it's not just your conference, Robert, it's everybody's conference, because I was watching people pitch in and do various and sundry. You have quite a cabinet, you have quite the support system, and the Masters, how many conferences did you have this year?
So I have 8 total, and I've ran 6.
So yeah, so 6 to 8 conferences in a year. I don't know how many of our listeners know the challenges that you faced. I know certainly your network, your close friends. I have an idea of exactly what it took for you to do what you did.
Yeah, I actually like talking about it because it's a testimony to our space, testimony to the community that we have. But I had a stroke in December and ended up finding out I have 12 brain tumors and 4 tumors, cancerous tumors in my body from melanoma. And 3 years earlier, I had surgery on my ear, and it was removed and replaced with a new ear. And this year, Rick, Julie Lewis, Kevin Clark, Bruce Malter, even you guys, you guys came here at my house to see me, Dan Regard, Michael Potters, Zelda Owens. I can go on and on and on. It's almost like, you got 37 seconds, Robert. It's like an award show type thing. But it was like when I had that stroke and then ended up in the hospital, it wasn't like I had the ability to communicate, really engage. And some of my best friends, my buddy Bobby Perez, and all of you chipped in and helped me out. And I was able to be at every conference despite my condition because of the community that supports us. And now I'm doing very well. I've actually, they put me on experimental treatment, which I'm like one of a handful of people in Orlando that receive it because it's brand new. And 2, it's experimental and it's brand new, and it's only allowed for a handful of people because it's meant for people who are terminal. And so I was being told that I had days, weeks. They were preparing my will and my funeral arrangement. At one point, I had decided where I'd be buried. This is all this year. And meanwhile, I flew to Dallas, I flew to Chicago, I flew to New York, I flew to London, I'm flying to San Francisco, and on Monday, we're in D.C. The 23rd, 24th of October, had to get that in. And then we're back here in Orlando, and the individuals that work with me have just kind of watched me go from, 180 as far as weight to 129, which is what I weighed in June, to now is like 149. And so they've watched me just go through this. And the only way I can say that I have been able to do this is because of the community, like with you guys at ACIDS and Rick, and individuals like Rick and Bobby and and Zelda and Kevin and Bruce and Julie, and it's almost like I feel bad because I can't remember everybody's names, but it's that big. It's that many people who just chipped in. You know what I mean? My sponsors, I've been, the one thing that I have a good friend of mine that even today I can't tell you who he is, and we all know him. And there's a good chance that he won't win his battle. And I can't talk about it because he doesn't want to talk about it. And that's sad. And so I figured he should have the community rally with him. And he hasn't had that. And I believe, and my doctors do, by the way, that the community and the Masters Conference is actually a key factor in my recovery. And so if you have these challenges, you guys are more than welcome, all of you, to contact me, talk to me. There's a lot of us in this community who have other things going on, from Kevin Nichols in San Francisco, who's got a charity for children, to ACIDS and the things that you guys are doing, raising money for these groups around the world. Even Women in Discovery is doing an amazing job with raising money for the Me Too program and things like that. So all of us have these lives where we're not just, in the legal community, but we have other things going on. So the more vocal you are, at least what I've found, is the more I'm honest about it, the more people work with me and the more they understand, wow, I can't even believe you're doing this. Currently before we jumped on this call, and then I'll shut up and I'll let you guys talk, but I'm currently radioactive because I just had a treatment yesterday that left me quarantined in my room, in my office basically, that because I can't be around people because I'm currently radioactive. So I'm actually doing this podcast, Radioactive. And what was the song you guys said you were thinking of?
Are you going to make me sing? I think Rick, should we break into the song? Radioactive. That's the only word I remember.
Yeah, and you're going to get it.
So that's
well, this is a place we'll splice that song in. That's what we're going to do there. But Robert, it's wonderful. It's wonderfully generous of you to invite people who are facing health challenges or may have loved ones or colleagues that are facing health challenges to contact you, and you're modeling behavior that I think is unusual in legal. I think I think of some of the folks that I know that have had health challenges that kept it a secret for a very long time, and then they were gone. And you have decided to do this a different way and take some risks. And as a founder of an organization would do, you took risks with your own health, and you're having a different outcome.
Yeah, I actually was fighting. It was this scary. They had hospice ready, and I told them, hell no. I said, if you did that to me, I will be dead, because I live off of communication, right? Who doesn't run a conference and doesn't like to communicate? Trust me. For those of you out there, if you don't like to communicate, don't run a conference, right? Maybe you're a software developer. Perfect. I don't know, but I appreciate that, Mary. I just don't want to take up
Robert,
the phone.
Well,
go ahead.
You are the star of the show, Robert. So, is there anything else that you'd want to tell our listeners?
Yeah, because there's a huge. That's why if you're in our space and you have the challenges that I do, our space. I always tell people this. We talk about it all the time. The legal community, especially the e-discovery community, is we're a service-based industry. We can't get away from it. We have a lot of vendors out there that are doing cloud only, that are doing services also, and then we have people who are doing, hosted solutions and so on and so forth. But the one thing you can't deny is that we are used to the fact that we do get these phone calls. Like when I sold software for Lexus, there was no urgency. There was no tied to your case. There was none of that concept. So at like 7 o'clock at night, nobody cared to call me and ask me about how to shepherdize a case, right? Nobody cared. They would certainly call me the next day, but in our space, we're used to being totally engaged all the time. And what that means for you is if you're going through something like I am, I've just accepted that this is just one of the factors. Much like I was sitting in Panera, if their Wi-Fi was down, I accepted that the fact that their Wi-Fi was down, because even in 2003, there was no such thing as, there was no iPhone, right? A lot of this was, you're kind of this island. And so developing a software company and a conference and all the other amazing things that we did out of nothing, out of thin air, I didn't have a cell phone like you do today. I didn't have any of this stuff. And so, keep in mind that when you run into veterans like all of us on this call, we're used to doing this without a lot of the comforts that we have today. And our industry is always on. And if you apply that mentality that you do for your client, like if you're working with a client, if you give everything you can for that client, then do the same for yourself. And if you're going through a medical issue and you're in our space, is you should be open about it. Because what I found is the more open I am, the more people want to help or assist or, understand that maybe, I'm not feeling good. Like I had one conference this year where I just had, halfway through the conference, I had to go lay down for like an hour. And everybody understood it. And that was the whole point. It wasn't like, oh, God, where's Robert? It was like, oh, that's good. He went and laid down. I was thinking he looked a little, and then they would talk about how I looked not so good and I should have laid down and how it was all their ideas. And everybody was the first one to tell me. I'm making a joke, but it's funny sometimes, the competition I get. But it's just proof how caring everybody is. And so that's what I would say, Mary, is, some of this stuff is very personal. I can give you that. And it's not something you want to run out and just, hey, I'm doing this or that. But I really had a lot of conversations this year where it was like, I have no choice. I have to do these things and, get a port in my chest or go to the hospital for an overnight or an observation or, I had no choice. Like I would do a conference call from the hospital bed, and no one would know. But then it reached those days.
I knew, Robert. Do you remember? You were getting a treatment, and it was your first experimental treatment, and I talked to you on the phone while you were in the hospital.
Right.
Do you remember that? And I was like, oh, do you want us to come to Chicago? What do you need from us? And we were like talking about logistics, and then all of a sudden you're like, hang on a minute, there's a nurse here. I was like, what? And then you told me where you were, and I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known.
Right. And, we're all kind of wired that way, right? I'm sure you are too, And that's the true success in our industry, I think. Because we can, all of us, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I always get comments like, you can just handle a lot. Well, I tell you what, at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday when a guy's yelling at you about trial boards because the medical colorization individual didn't colorize the bone the right color and he's appearing in court or she's appearing in court Monday morning and can't get a hold of anybody and it's still 3 o'clock in the morning and he's freaking out or she's freaking out, it teaches you something, right, guys? I mean, it's like, after so many of those, you get used to it. You just handle it. And that's where I commend everybody that's in our space. There's really, I would say medical's probably used to dealing with the emergencies and challenges that we do. But outside of that, unless you're on the front lines of military, and firemen and police and things like that, legal is just as crazy, right? I mean, it's like we always have a challenge. There's always something to deal with. And the four of us on this call, we're marketers, and, you know, we represent a certification company and a conference, but we all were born out of, you know, being that service, or that, I mean, would you guys agree, being that relied upon individual for those people that we just named? And so let that industry help you. Mm-hmm. Because of what I've noticed is, through my cancer journey, is we have, especially with masters, but I've developed a community that that really does care. Like, I've had people come up to me and say that I've helped them with their career, and I didn't even know I was helping them with their career, you know. And so it's just been an excellent ride to end up where I'm at now, which sounds odd. I'm in a much happier place than I was, you know, before I met Rick, and before we started Wave and Masters and you name it. So, you know, it's definitely a battle, but I think I'm the kind of person where if I didn't have enough battles, I probably wouldn't. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but
I'd say you're challenge oriented, Robert.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an overcomer. You need a challenge to overcome, and each challenge you overcome makes you a better, stronger Robert. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, it's possible. It's very possible. I don't know, Rick, do you have stuff to add here? Because Rick is basically, I would say we're almost interchangeable at this point. and I wouldn't say that lightly, because there's only two other people that are like that. And one is Wes Hodges, who's not on this call, who is battling, not him personally, but his brother's battling some major issues. And then my best friend, which is Bobby Perez. And so these are all people who have been with me as long as Rick has. And I rely on all three of them weekly, you know. And so it's I don't know, Rick, you have anything to add there?
No, this part's about your journey, and I'm grateful to listen to this and certainly be a part of all of it.
Well, no, you're a big part of it. I mean, it's Robert in the third person, which we always used to tease about, but I can't do this stuff by myself. You know, it's at one point in time I was here in my living room, which Kaylee and Mary, you remember because you showed up and brought me food as I was in the hospital bed. And what was I going to say there? Oh, I do have a little bit of cancer brain, by the way, so if I lose track, it's because of that. But I've just always had this excellent support, Rick, and without you and Kaylee, Mary, and Bobby, and on with the individuals out there, it's like, you know, I don't think Wave could have existed. I don't think Masters could have existed. And, of course, our other group that we had a hand in, that group wouldn't exist, because Rick, me, and Wes, that was it. It was just us dreaming up ideas, and that's all we were doing, is we were dreaming up ideas because we didn't have the money to do it. There was no funder behind us that said, hey, I'll give you $20 million. You know, we had to create our own money, create our own marketing, and create our own community to be able to educate people on PSTs and OSTs and NSF. And what am I missing, Rick, there? Was there another one?
No, well, there's many, but
yeah. Good. Yeah. I mean, so it's just amazing how we had to do this. And if you were at our 007 party, you met us at this. We were at the smallest point, and I'll give you a hint. I think this is hysterical. I went into. So we basically started. We were like 4 or 5 people, and thanks to Rick, Wes, hard work, we could finally start hiring people. And I'll never forget it. I don't know if you remember it, Rick, but it's a 2-part story. One is that we were looking at office space, and everything in Orlando was like $3,000 to $6,000 a month. And I always looked at it like, crap, you know, that's just atrocious. Like, you know, what could we do that's cheaper than that? And it dawned on me that apartment complexes are empty during the day because everybody goes to work. This is in 2003. So I actually go to this apartment complex, and I rent a 3-bedroom apartment. And when I were telling you about decorating desks, that was actually in a 3-bedroom apartment. We had a washer and dryer, a kitchen, and all the bedrooms were used, and the living room was used with cubicles. And we actually did our own laundry there. It was crazy, right? It was like we lived there, worked there, the whole thing. The one time, it was only one time, and it never happened again, but one time we had the doorbell ring. And we had been there for, 3 years, Rick? 2 years?
2 years, I think, yeah.
And because we finally grew out of that, and then we went and we chose a office complex across the street. And so we pushed all our stuff around the parking lot and into the building. But the doorbell rang, and I could sort of remember his name. It's like Daniel something. And he's
Michael
like,
Daniak,
"This Wave software?" Yeah. And it was like, "Is this Wave software?" And I was like, instead of, "Hey, come on in," I stepped out and closed the door. I said, "Hey, let's go for a walk." I never brought him in. I don't think I did, Rick. And But it was shocking. I don't even know how he knew where we were. And that was the first and last time that anybody had ever seen us in that apartment complex. But that's how we were. You know, we developed a lot of these brands that are out there today that are big. Andrew Seja, who you guys know very well, when we moved over to that office building, one of the first people to come visit us was Andrew Seja. And the first integration that we did with Relativity, at that time it was Kekura Relativity, so we always called him Kekura. And a lot of the individuals there we knew during this time. And I think they were the same size as us at that point, Rick, weren't they?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, and so we had many conversations with them, and I think we were the first integrators, weren't we the first ones? Trident was?
I believe so as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't have an API, and so we developed directly into Relativity at that point. And we were quite proud of it years later. But just to watch their success and what they've accomplished is amazing because we're those kids that remember them at, down the street, with the BMX that, we could just ride down the street and say, "Hey, let's go biking today," right? Because they were small like us. We actually had, you might remember at one point we had, and with many of our other partners out there too, but we had, I remember vividly, we put Rock Band at Legal Tech and we were playing Rock Band with, here was, the Wave people and the Relativity people with Rich and Nick and Andrew. We were playing Rock Band together and drinking. And I remember asking him about a booth at a conference, and he says, "Why would I ever do that?" And so it's just funny even today to see them, how they have that small footprint into a lot of even my events. And so it's just an amazing time because there's a lot of individuals we've watched grow and develop and companies develop and, and I've got photos of all of them. So if you ever want to stop me, just let me know and I'll see if I can dig it up. I don't know.
That's awesome.
I think when we post this podcast, Robert, having a couple of those older photos would be great to have along with it.
I've got one that's really solid. I just don't think it's the right one I can send you. But when Andrew was at, because I'm really impressed with Andrew and what he accomplished, right? Looking back, one of the critiques I give myself is stop being focused on all this other stuff and focus on your company, and maybe we can get some funding and really blow it up. Because even Trident today, if we could dust that off and plug it back in the market, I think would be phenomenal, what we developed. And that's even a crazy story on its own. It's a whole other podcast, right? But yeah, I have a photo of Andrew in our office, and we were washing dishes, and they took a picture of us washing dishes. So I have a picture of one of the most successful people in our space washing dishes with me in my software company. And
the two chief cooks and bottle washers, huh?
Yeah, it was basically that. And to this day, it's just very nice. And, you know, John Trudenik's always been very nice to me. The Lexus people have always been very nice. CT Summation at one point, Wave was integrated with all of these companies. We were the first, I think, Rick, to integrate with every platform out there at once, right? Because I remember us flying to one of the best user groups, and granted, there's a lot of great user groups out there, but one of the ones we enjoyed the most was in Palm Springs. Lexus had hosted this users group, and it wasn't huge like Relativity Fest is. It's not even, it's smaller than one of my smallest conferences. But Palm Springs was just so beautiful, and the way that they had it set up was just so amazing. But, you know, we've watched these companies change hands and developed and grown to be billion-dollar organizations, or to go through 3 or 4 organizations into finally finding a home. So it's just really intriguing, and I never thought our space would get to the point where funders would come along and actually put money into these organizations. And that's probably the one thing I wish that we had seen when we had Wave, is no one was getting handed $20 million to develop a software company. And we had a company that desperately could have used a $20 million infusion, because our product was so amazing, we just didn't have the resources to get it out quick enough. And I think that's, even today, Rick, would you feel that Trident today, Explorer, would be a solid solution today?
Yeah, for sure. There's still even a need for its niche, plug-in, but yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mute, because, and I'll give you a hint so you can stop me and ask me, and that's how I can tell if you listen to this podcast, because at the end is when I told you. But the federal government owns it now. It has nothing to do with any of us. If you want to hear that story, just grab me and I'll tell you. But that's where that product sits. And so it's one of the few things that we sit around and go, man, I wish it hadn't ended up like that. So even today, I think about it, and it's like we work so hard for it. So, but yeah, so it's been quite the ride, Mary Kaylee. I believe the story, and I've got a longer story ahead of me. But what I've dealt with this year and over the years with Rick and all of my partners and individuals like you, Kaylee, and hopefully give people hope, and they're going through challenges. I actually, just because I mentioned a couple things in New York, I've had 4 or 5 some of my key speakers come up to me and tell me what's going on with them, and ask my opinion, and it's been nice, because it's like I'm not alone, they're not alone, and that's really what I think is the key to all this. So
I agree, Robert, and I'm so happy that you are talking about it, because one of the things that I shared with you was I had people reaching out to me on LinkedIn and sending me messages and asking about you, and you have a huge community of people that you don't even realize. Maybe they've attended a master's and you didn't meet them personally, which I would be surprised at, because you talk to absolutely everyone. But let's say that might have happened. But you have a lot of people that have watched you, followed you, people you don't even know. And I think they want to know how you are, because they care. And secondarily, thank you for boldly speaking about it. Something that really you wish you wouldn't have to be so bold to. Because it does open up the conversation, and it gives other people an example, and that it's okay to talk about. And actually, when you do, you can receive the love, care, prayers, and everything else from people, and know that you matter, and you've made a difference, and you have, Robert. So thank you for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you guys and everything you guys have done, and that's just half the story. I mean, those of you who know the Childress family know that, I've also been through a divorce during this whole thing. And there's part two to all the other challenges that I've dealt with. And I had a therapist, and hopefully you guys don't cut this out because this is probably one of the things I remember the most, but I had a therapist that looked at me 3 years ago and then looked at me 2 months ago because I've always believed in therapy. And she said, I have a person in here with one of the 5, 6 things that you're dealing with. Each one of them is dealing with one of the things that you're dealing with, and you have all of them, and those guys are all falling apart. And so, they're going through divorce, or they're dealing with cancer, or their kids have problems with them because they just went through divorce, or just kind of like my life, but individually, each one's dealing with each one, and I don't know why, but the only thing I think of is there's 2 factors that have helped me, I think, be who I am, and Rick has this experience too, and believe it or not, so does Wes Hodges. One is being military brat, and what's an interesting fact, which I don't think you and Haley knew, but Rick, were you born at Mather?
Yeah. No, I wasn't born at Mather, but I lived in that same area. Right.
So Richard Clark, Wes Hodges, who was my IT developer for Wave Software, we're sitting at Panera. We met for the first time, and it turns out his dad was born at Mather Air Force Base, basically within a month of when I was born, at Mather Air Force Base, and his dad was working on my dad's plane, and then we found out Rick had a connection with Mather Air Force Base, and so what I'm getting at,
yeah, my dad was in the Air Force there.
Right, and so being a military brat was a key factor in me. And then being the later part of my life, being involved in the legal community, are 2 big factors, and I think of who we are, because it was the common thread that we all kind of found out later on. And, I do think we've been able to handle a lot more, because I know Rick has his own story on his own, and so does Wes. And I'm talking about the original 3 people who you're probably sitting there today. You probably are at a Starbucks now and dreaming of that idea, or that next thing. And we just never let anybody get in our way. We just, same attitude I've got today with cancer. And I'm just going to continue doing it, and until it's done, until it catches me or I catch it. And I think, luckily, we've had success. There's a lot of the one thing that we did do, that we did do but didn't do, is an old friend of mine, Dina Kaufman. She's the general counsel of Johnson & Johnson, and still today I talk to her. And we had created Assessment First, Kaylee and Mary. Did I tell you guys about this?
I don't think so.
No, I haven't heard this.
So this is a story that involves Rick and I, and we had a guy named Tokels that we called Tokels, right, Rick? And he had left a CD of data. Do you want to tell the story, Rick?
No, you go right ahead.
You're just going to let me talk the whole time, huh? That's so easy.
Sure.
And then you come by at the end and sound really smart, like in the last 3 minutes, you're like, well, I have this genius thing, and yeah, man, why didn't Rick talk?
No, I think he's going to say that you didn't let him talk. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the club. But no, we had this guy who left the CD on a urinal, and opposing counsel actually used the same urinal, and it turned out to be, it just happened to be our dumb luck that the service bureau that we had, opposing counsel had found this CD of data for their opposing counsel and contacted their opposing counsel, said, hey, you might want to come pick this up. So it was very embarrassing for us. And some of these individuals that we hired were recommended by some of the leaders in our space in 2002 or 3 at the time. I had one employee that I had escorted out of the office with police because of his challenges he's had with our clients and supporting them correctly. And he was recommended, and some of the challenges we had was like the CD, and he was recommended from a very reputable source in our space. So after the police showed up and pulled him out, and then we continued on, I kept having this concept of how do I verify their actual knowledge? Like, how do I actually verify or assess the employee before I hire them? Like, if they know iPro and they know that at this time it was iPro, Summation. Summation had Summation had Summation trainers everywhere. They just happened to also be concordance trainers. But I had nothing to verify the people that I was hiring actually really knew the product. So I came up with this idea called Assessment First. And it was 90-something pages, and Dina Kaufman and I wrote it together, along with input from Lindsay and Rick and Wes and other people. And it turned out that we couldn't figure out how to monetize it correctly. Just at the time, the technology really didn't exist to do the assessments like we'd want to. And so we had a logo for it called Assessment First, but one page was a thing called the Masters Conference, where everybody got together, and you were master of concordance, master of summation, master of iPro, master of whatever, and that's why it was called the Masters Conference. So you could be master of blank, and so you go through our assessment and go through our verification, and then we would say, okay, you're a summation concordance trainer and you're master of summation concordance. And so they would take assessment first, and then if they didn't pass it, they would have to go up to the Masters Conference and learn more, get educated more, kind of like what you guys do today. So instead of, how should I say it? Instead of continuing on with the assessment, because we had to choose, and so instead of doing assessment, we started doing software, which was Wave. But we always had this idea that we could keep a conference, and that was why it's called Masters Conference. It's because it was supposed to be Masters of Relativity, Masters of One, whatever it could be, that kind of thing. And back in 2003-04 time frame, there really wasn't the technology to do that. But we kept the conference. So.
Yeah, it was basically one of those things like, okay, Robert, you can pick Masters Conference, Wave, or Assessment First, but you can't have all three. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It was just very busy.
No, but that's pretty true, right? I mean, that's how entrepreneurs like yourself are, right? It's like, we need to be told no. I guess that's a lesson that took me a while to learn, but I understand it. And no, you can't do that. And I think this year has been a lesson in that, because suffering from the extreme, let's put it this way, I'm sponsored by Gilead Science for my treatments, because out of 1,000 people, they needed one person who had melanoma with the amount of tumors and was terminal. And I was the only one that qualified for it. So I'm actually sponsored by one of my clients, one of my speakers, but they don't even know it. And what's so crazy is I basically was told no. I was like, well, what if we did this thing? What if we did that? And they're like, Robert, stick with what you got, focus on what you got, get through this, and then we'll go to the next step. And I don't know, it's just been a hell of a year. And from even the point of, and I'm seriously highly thankful for everyone who's helped me, including people who don't know they've even helped me. It's just been insane. Cash Butler, who's been a really good friend of mine, has helped me tremendously through this process. Even some of his friends who I don't even know have helped me tremendously. My sponsors who have been involved in the conference have helped me tremendously. And we've created, and so the end result, I guess to sum up this podcast, is the end result is we all kind of work together, and I'm starting to learn more and more that people are doing business with me not because they love Masters, but because they like Masters, they enjoy it, but they really enjoy how they're treated, and they enjoy the people that we work with, and it's really turned into this excellent community of people that really do care and care about each other. It's crazy cool, all the way down to you guys, ACIDS. So it's amazing, I guess. And I'm proof. I'm proof of what you get, if that's what you like. Some of you could hear go, oh, shit. You know, you probably can't have
Robert,
in your
Robert,
podcast.
I want to thank you for taking the time and grabbing up Rick and bringing him in. And Kaylee, thank you. What I'm hearing, Robert, is extraordinary humility, humor, gratitude. I reflect those things back to you. We're so grateful for all the help that you've given us here at ACEDS. And the community that you fostered as well. And this is the first of several podcasts I believe we will have with you. This has been quite interesting, and I wrote down a couple of threads that we didn't.
Is it me that's breaking up, or is it you?
It's Mary. I was hearing the same thing, and I thought it was me. Or Hope.
Yeah. You still there, Mary?
So I think we will. She's out. So I think we will end it here. And Robert, you know we are around the corner. We absolutely care and want to hear how you're doing. We applaud you with your success this year with the Masters. And actually, Mary and I were like, how can we even complain about going to conferences when Robert is getting all these treatments for your cancer and you're going and planning and working at your conferences? So you've been an inspiration to us all.
Yeah, I would say that the thing that sucks the most is I'm kind of like that kid that's like, I could do it myself. You know what I mean? And, you know, that's really kind of how I am. But I have so many people that'll follow me upstairs, follow me downstairs, get me a wheelchair. Don't you need a wheelchair? And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm going to walk it. Are you sure you want to walk it? I have the same conversations every day. You know, like, you know, people opening doors for me and you know, we're just wired like we can do it. And I think that's probably the way you should take out of this podcast is, you know, you can do it, you know. It's just pull your strings up, and that's why it's disappointing when I hear people having challenges that I have and just not believing in themselves about it, you know. And it takes a lot to push back. Go ahead.
You've done an amazing job, Robert. We couldn't be more proud of you, and I couldn't be happier that it is September 21st, and we are having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm past my expired date, so how about that?
You're radioactive, and you're past the expiration date. What?
Right. Usually that's bad. For some reason, that's good.
It's really good. So thank you both. Thank you, Rick, Clark. It was wonderful to hear your story and to have you on here. And Mary, did you make it back, or are you gone?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right. Well, then I just want to say thank you to all of you for spotting me during my communication difficulties here. And Robert, what I hear is gratitude and humility from you. And we reflect that gratitude back to you for everything that you've done for us in creating an opening for community. Because that's definitely a big part of what we're bringing, Kaylee and myself and ACEDS. And just thank you. And thank you, Rick, for joining. And thank you, Kaylee, for covering. So I expect to see all of you on a future podcast.
Yeah, we could do what's going on with cancer this month. But I think I really appreciate you guys taking your time, staying after me. You know, it's really excellent, and I'm more than happy to help assist. I'm sure Rick feels the same way. Whatever you need from me. So thank you again for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. And we will end this particular podcast with an invitation to a future podcast. Because I have a feeling once we put this out, we're going to get some communications from folks that may have some questions for you on some of those threads you dropped.
That's exactly what I need right now.
There we go. And so, Deja, take us out.